Hassan, thank you so much. Did I understand you correctly as well about Bab al-Mandab that you're saying you don't think it should be closed right now? Do you think it's the wrong time for that?
No, 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 no. I referred to a conversation that I had with
Okay,
Vanessa
okay,
on her
previously.
show. Yeah,
Sure.
previously it wasn't the right thing, but
Yeah,
now it's actually something that should be done, and this is the perfect time actually. And
yeah,
they played that card on the strategic level correctly. One thing that I want to mention, unfortunately, we have good military strategists. We don't have good diplomats. So
mm,
again, as I mentioned, this is the perfect opportunity, the perfect time to play that card. But
yeah,
because that decision was up to the Iranian leader and the leader of the resistance in other countries, that decision was taken in a sort of in a sphere in a chamber that was disconnected from the Iranian diplomats. That's why it
sure,
has been so successful.
sure. Thank you so much for explaining that. Also, I just wanted to say to viewers, we're going to try and have this video published as a collaboration, so you'll be able to see Vanessa's channel link and also Asan's channel as well. And I really, really highly recommend that you go and watch that. Quite often, when I log in, I see conversations between Vanessa and Asan directly, and I really enjoy listening to them so much. So please do go and check out those channels after this show as well. I'm sure you're going to love it. Asan, another question I'll ask you, and then I'll take that to Vanessa as well. I've spoken with you previously, and um,
I'm
very
sorry,
wisely.
sorry,
Sorry?
can we go to Vanessa because I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, sure. We can start this
I
question.
don't
This
feel right. It doesn't feel well.
we'll
Right
start
to
this same
me.
Oh, I,
question with
I
Vanessa. I
actually
wanted to
enjoy
take it to
listening
both
to
of
you.
you. So,
Well, can I just
Vanessa, what
add
else?
something about
Yes,
Yemen because I think this is also an incredibly important
yes,
developing theater. I think, we've seen very clear statements from Ansarullah, basically that there will only be a unified Yemen. There's not going to be a continued
mm,
Saudi influence inside Yemen, which is a very, very strong statement. At the same time, as Ehsan said, the military strategy in Iran is so strong because then we saw the breaking of the blockade, the flights coming in to bring delegates to the funeral of the supreme leader, but then also bringing, as far as I understood, the injured, the people in need of medical care to Iran. So this was the first time since 2015 when Saudi Arabia launched its unlawful aggression against the Yemeni people, that the injured who have also been blockaded and besieged and no access, well, the hospitals have been bombed, but
mm,
also they've had no medicines, nothing coming into the country. So this was an extraordinary act, both militarily, but also from a humanitarian perspective. And I think this is what people forget in the West. We're so used to seeing everything through a Western lens. We
mm,
forget that there is another lens that we can actually look at the world through that
mm,
doesn't necessarily impact on us in the way that imperialism and colonialism has impacted on them, but it has a positive impact. It reminds us of who we should be in this world today. We should be helping the oppressed. We should be helping the besieged, the blockaded, the injured, the poor, the genocided. All those people should be receiving our help without question. And that is what Iran did. When I saw the interview with the Iranian pilot after he basically was going to land in Sana'a,
yes.
and Saudi Arabia started bombing Sana'a airport, and he rerouted to Hodeidah. When he came back, honestly, it broke my heart in a good way when I saw him interviewed. There
Mm,
wasn't any of the hubris and ego that you would see from someone from Israel or someone from the West.
mm,
He just said, "This is my job. This is
mm,
my job to help the." I'm paraphrasing, to help the oppressed peoples. But
mm,
also, I would ask everyone in Iran to be doing this. Also, it was it was kind of so impressive. And I think a really important point that I want to make beyond all of the kind of military, political, geopolitical
Yes.
strategy is what this entire conflict is teaching us, reteaching us, is what it really means to be a part of humanity and to actually risk everything in order to defend humanity against the Epstein class, against the Zionist class, against genocide, against oppression, starvation, resource theft, etc. And I think, when you look at what Yemen is achieving, I mean, as far as I know, the Bab el-Mandab Strait is only closed to Saudi ships for the
At the
time
moment,
being,
yeah.
unless something has
Yeah.
developed. And then they're basically, what are they doing? This is like, what this is demonstrating is finally the complete unity of the resistance axis from a military strategic perspective.
Yes.
Because what has Yemen done? It's effectively disabled the East-West pipeline,
Yes.
right? Which was the perceived alternative to the Hormuz Strait. Right.
No,
So
that's a brilliant move.
what we're
Yes.
actually seeing is this moving of the pieces in synchronicity with perfect timing. As Ehsan said, it wouldn't have been great timing maybe a couple of months ago, even though everyone was like, what's Yemen doing?
Yes.
Because they're unusually quiet. Yemen is usually, I mean, Yemenis are just amazing. They just want to be in the middle of everything and doing everything. And I remember the statement saying, please, Iran, like leave something for us, and they're amazing people.
No, to
for
be
this.
honest,
I mean,
you're
after
so
what
right.
they've suffered for the last 10 years.
Vanessa, you're so right. I just can never forget how when they started attacking Israel in support of Gaza, and they were saying, and Israel
Yeah.
was hitting them back with missiles, and they were saying any missile that you throw towards us, we would be happy because that's one less missile for Gaza. And I was just thinking, no one else, I mean, that kind of moral kind of argument just doesn't get made these days. It is
Oh,
really
they're
amazing.
amazing. And even, I mean, the Pentagon actually pulled Trump off
Yes.
bombing Yemen because, dude, you're losing. We're running out of missiles and we've still got
Yes.
Iran and China to go. Like, what are you doing? You're never going to defeat,
Yes. And
this is the
and
point.
Vanessa, this is what I was wanting to ask you actually. It's just it my mind is baffled when I think about these countries. I mean, um, it's just hard to think of. I try to give them some benefit of doubt, a lot of these countries, Gulf nations, and the moves that they're making, to somehow see that even if I don't agree with them, or even if they're morally wrong what they're doing, there is some benefit, there is some rational thinking behind it. But I just don't see it at all. I see no rational thinking behind what America's doing. I see no rational thinking behind what Jordan is doing, bringing all the assets to Jordan and making itself a bigger target. There's no rational thinking behind what Bahrain and Kuwait are doing, who are saying we might go back and attack Iran directly. What are they going to achieve that America and Israel haven't been able to do, these tiny little countries? But then
Well, yeah.
what does Saudi Arabia? I just don't understand, why did Saudi Arabia pick this fight with Yemen at this given time, given the vulnerabilities before that were exposed, and they had to stop the war ultimately with Yemen. And Yemen is now even stronger. And now Saudi Arabia is being bombed also by militias in Iraq. So it's going to be bombed from Yemen and from Iraq. Um, what is the thinking behind it from a Saudi Arabian point of view?
I don't know. Are they actually getting targeted by Iraqi resistance? I thought that was,
Yes,
thought that might
yes.
have been like
Apparently missiles and drones.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
But I think maybe it was also like a trying to show that Yemen can't do all of this. It needs
Oh, I
help
see.
from Iraq. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but that's what I was kind of seeing in the last couple of days.
Yes.
Look, all of the Zionist Arab Persian Gulf states, that's exactly what they are, and that's exactly what they were created to be, to some degree or another. An extension of Zionist power in the region under the control, first of all, of the British, and then, of course, which effectively engineered this, and then Washington. And you've seen Trump sort of coming out and saying that he'll give Saudi Arabia the ability to develop nuclear weapons. I mean, as if that's ever going to happen, you know?
Yes, I want to talk
And the
about
same
that as
thing
well,
he
actually.
did with, yeah, I mean, you know, the same
Because
thing he did with Erdogan saying, oh, you couldn't come in as part of the F-35 program again. And Turkey immediately apparently sells the S-400s that were the big problem in the
yeah,
first place, that they bought them from Russia, sold them to one of the Gulf states, probably UAE. And you're seeing, for example, the UAE developing defense agreements with Israel, purchasing agreements for weapons, which also, of course, include the Chinese Wing-Long drones and air defense systems that potentially then are going to be channeled back into Israel. But that's what they were created for. And ultimately, what choice do they have other than, of course, get absorbed into Yemen, Iran, Iraq?
yes,
I mean, Iraq could quite happily take back Kuwait.
yes,
Yemen would, I'm sure, love the opportunity to invade Saudi Arabia. You know, so ultimately, I don't actually think they have a lot of choice. And there is some posturing, there is some defensive posturing by Qatar, for example. Even Saudi Arabia at times has made overtures to Iran because they know they're in between a rock and a hard place.
yeah,
But
yes,
they're hedging their bets. And they're being given, of course, they're largely dependent upon the United States for any defense capability, although I'm quite sure it's actually not the Saudis running their defense capabilities anyway,
yeah,
because I don't have a very high opinion of Saudi military ability from any perspective, any of these
no,
Gulf states, because they've
yes,
never had to defend themselves. They've never really had to militarily get involved anywhere except as an extension or putting the money into whatever destabilization campaign that serves Israel's expansion project, like, for example, in
yes.
Syria.
So true. First of all, I hope you guys are okay with time.
Yeah,
Yeah, good. Thank you. Good,
I'm
because I'm
okay.
really
Yeah.
enjoying this conversation, and I still have a few questions left to ask you guys. Um, Ehsan, I was just going to say that I've spoken with you before, and very wisely, you've said, talked about America, and you've said that whenever you're talking about the enemy, you like to give them um, the benefit of doubt in being more intelligent and more clever and more powerful than they actually are, rather than trying to underestimate. You like to overestimate them. And with that in mind, I'm just thinking, uh, constantly Trump is talking about maybe taking over Kharg Island, having boots on the ground. Logically, that makes zero sense to me. But like I was saying to Vanessa, nothing any of these countries is doing is making any sense at all. But if you did want to overestimate them, um, and if you think about like a ground invasion of Iran, what options does America have? There's two talks going on at the moment. There's the taking over of Kharg Island, and there's also arming the Kurd militias in Iraq and having them enter Iran. How do you see those two options?
Look, if you had given the half of the abilities, the tools that the US military has to an IRGC officer, to IRGC, they would have already not only liberated Palestine and end the apartheid, they would possibly even liberate the Americans themselves from this tyrannical regime that is governing over them. The problem is that, as you mentioned, the hubris, the sort of arrogance of these individuals that makes them 100% incapable of getting the feedback. I said this on another show that my impression of Pete Hegseth is one that of a troll, like a troll, a big freaking giant stupid troll that has a big club over his shoulder is coming out of this cave with those like torn apart shorts or whatever. This is, to me, this is Pete Hegseth. And Pete Hegseth, Donald Duck, like all the people who are running the US regime. They're so cartoonishly arrogant that they have proceeded to do something very difficult, which is to make the rest of the world think that United States military is not powerful. But that's not the case. The fact is that every 27 seconds, a US aircraft carrier can launch a fighter jet into the space, into the airspace, and at the same time that it can launch a supercarrier, at the same time that it can launch an aircraft, it can actually have one land on it, right? That's not something that the rest of the countries in the world can do. There are very powerful weapons that they have. The fighter jets on a single aircraft carrier are sometimes enough to actually defeat another country. There are many things that you can talk about with regard to the abilities that they have. So make no mistake, with the right strategy, I do actually think that they can basically capture Kharg Island. But the problem is that they don't have that right strategy. The problem is that when Donald J. Trump, Donald Duck, Ronald McDonald, when this freaking stupid idiot was on TV and say, "You're fired," or whatever with his stupid moronic voice, back then when he was doing that, we were preparing for this war, right? Back then when Pete Hegseth was making stupid comments on Fox News, we were preparing for this war. Back then when they were killing innocent civilians in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and letting their ego to balloon up, we were getting ready for this war. So when you look at the people who are, and I talked about this very vaguely because I don't want to give them the template to defeat my country. But let me tell you this, they have certain technologies, they have certain abilities. You can't take away that from them. This is the truth. The truth is that if I remember correctly, the amphibious assault attacks of United States are larger, have a bigger water displacement than, for example, the water displacement of Charles de Gaulle, French aircraft carrier. This is the truth. So they have tools at their disposal. The problem is that they're not really prepared to use them in the right way. And another problem that they have is that they don't take the correct route. They think that they're in some kind of competition race with Iran. And this is too vague for your audience to actually get something out of this. Let me put it this way. Before the start of this war, and there would be hints of what I'm trying to refer to in all of this, they had the right approach when it comes to defeating Iran. It's much easier to defeat Iran in terms of trying to overthrow its government, right? Rather than fighting a war against Iran. The Iranians have this mentality, this mindset, that whenever you fight them, they will unite and rally around the flag, right? Our national sport is wrestling. I always make this distinction between the Iranians and the Chinese. Our national sport is wrestling. So we're very tough, we get in your face, we fight you, right? And we're very resilient, right? When you look at the Chinese traditional martial arts, it's Kung Fu, which is about like evading and being in harmony and, flowing like water, those things. They're sort of better at, maintaining their symmetry during the time of peace. So you see United States actually doing the wrong thing with regard to both of these two countries. United States didn't, do anything about China until it has become like a problem that can't be solved easily. They
Yeah.
always thought that they can sort of change the entire nature of China. They couldn't. They can't because of the fact that they're completely unfamiliar with the Chinese literature, journey to the West, all those things. They're
Yeah.
completely unfamiliar with all those things. But they succeeded in changing the Iranian society to a great extent, unfortunately. When you look at Generation X, Generation Z, apologies, and you go to a cafe and you see these people, and I have nothing against them. It's just the fact that I think that they have gone to a cartoonish extent in one direction. You see
Yeah.
them greeting each other with "안녕하세요" or whatever it is the actual pronunciation is, and you see them, you see Gothic markets and so on and so forth. I don't have problem with the way that they dress or whatever. I'm referring to that as a symptom of the fact that they have internalized many of the propaganda that United States wanted to disseminate against Iran. And the famous quote by Benjamin Netanyahu against Iran, that you don't need to attack Iran. All you need to do is to broadcast Melrose Place, the footage of Beverly Hills kids to the kids in Iran, and you
Yeah.
will succeed. They were on a very good trajectory in pursuing that. The problem is that, and again, I'm sorry to take so much of your time, but I didn't want to like give them a template, but I have to sort of do it now. If they had gone down that route, they could have succeeded. Now they are in a situation that replicating that, I wouldn't say is impossible, but it's very difficult,
Yes.
right? But it's still possible. How? I'm not going to actually give them the details. But that's a better route in
Mm.
order to control and confine Iran rather than fighting a war. The problem
Yes.
is that Benjamin Netanyahu sees himself as, what's that analogy? The sort of Damocles, or I'm sorry, I've forgotten that. You know what I'm trying to refer to. He,
Damocles.
he
Democrats.
Damocles. Thank you, Vanessa, lifesaver. Yeah. So this is the problem that he's facing. He actually feels the pressure, and this pressure is in fact what basically brings his doom. One of the
Yes.
bad things that actually can happen to Iran is for the Knesset re-election to happen, and Benjamin Netanyahu is replaced by someone else. This is actually contrary to what people think.
Yes.
This is one of the bad things that can actually happen to Iran.
I agree.
But again, like because you see these people having sort of very personal reasons for waging this war, rather than having the best interest of their nation states. I mean, you can't really
Yes.
refer to Israel as a nation state, but their own population. That's what the problem stems, and that's why I think that they will never succeed.
This is so true, Ehsan, because I constantly think all these wages that America has been waging, these wars that America has been waging around the world, not one of them I can think has benefited anything to the ordinary American on the street. It doesn't benefit the people. It doesn't benefit the state. So even if it was an illegal war, immoral war, if it has some benefit for the state, some benefit for the American people, one could kind of try to understand, okay, this is why they've done it. But it, far from having a benefit, is to the detriment of the American people, is to the detriment of the American state. But there's these lobby groups inside America who benefit personally on a financial basis, and they're getting richer and richer, while not just the rest of the world, but even Americans are suffering because of this. And that's why the strategies that they make are not wise long-term strategies to benefit America. It's quick strategies to benefit those in the military industrial complex. Vanessa, I'm also just wanted to pick that up with you. So, Ehsan mentioned the Kharg Island, how potentially it could be taken. I think even if it was taken, I just see absolutely no strategic advantage to America for doing so. And it would happen at a great loss. So they would have to sacrifice a lot of lives to control the Kharg Island, and they wouldn't be able to take it for long. There's very little benefit. But if that did happen, the campaign would have to be launched from somewhere, and a lot of people are pointing towards Kuwait, that it would have to come from Kuwait. And I'm just thinking again from these Gulf countries' point of view. Often American analysts are talking about regime change in Iran, boots in the ground on the ground in Iran. And I'm thinking the way these countries are behaving, before anything happens to Iran, we might see regime change in a lot of these countries, and we might actually see boots in the ground in Kuwait. How do you see the potential kind of balancing act that these countries are having to do? You also already mentioned that it's possible that even Iraq could attempt to take back Kuwait. I think, are we seeing a danger of like this whole conflict widening across the region?
Definitely. I mean, I think the fact that you effectively have NATO building up now inside Syria, and there was like I don't know if it was generated by Trump's team, but there was a map that was circulating. I'm sure Ehsan saw it, which just showed all of these multiple NATO, American, Zionist invasion points into Iran. I mean, it was kind of quite comical. But when you actually look at American Zionist expansion, which always happens in parallel anyway, despite the rumors that there are any kind of rift between Israel and the United States. Yeah, it's true to a large extent. They have control of Azerbaijan, Armenia, the Kurdish separatist areas in Iraq to some degree. Iraq itself is, of course, in a very precarious situation. It is effectively occupied by the United States still. There are pushes now to disarm the Iraqi resistance, just as there are ongoing here in Lebanon. But I think, just as we've seen Yemen or Ansarullah basically say, if there is really an escalation to this degree, then there is a chance we'll cross the border into Saudi Arabia. I'm quite sure that the Iraqi resistance groups have this in their mind, that if there is any kind of escalation, particularly if it's emanating from Kuwait, there is potential for the Iraqi resistance to enter Kuwait. Bahrain has terrible problems. I mean, that's why they're cracking down on the Shia Muslim communities there. So they have internal issues. Even Saudi Arabia and Hijaz, there are resistance factions. I wrote an article quite a couple of years ago now about the ring of fire that Iran actually has in the region, and that includes the Hijaz resistance groups, even in Saudi Arabia, right? So within each of these Gulf countries, and Jordan, I mean, Jordan is one of the most volatile in the sense that there are huge numbers of Palestinians there, right? And so there is potential even there for huge backlash. We saw it since October the 7th. So both internally and externally, the threats to these regional actors on behalf of US, Israel, CIA, MI6, etc., are under existential threat, in my opinion. And we're going to see a degree of maneuvering. I mean, I think Qatar, Saudi Arabia, according to what I was told, has actually kind of backed out of the Syria project. They're actually not funding it. It's Kuwait and UAE that are putting the money into that for any operation against Lebanon. Saudi Arabia has kind of stood back and said, no, I'm not putting any more money into this.
Yes.
Qatar is definitely, I'd be interested to get Ehsan's opinion on that, but Qatar is definitely maneuvering to kind of get some kind of middle ground so that it isn't going to be eventually targeted.
Yes. Vanessa, also now, I want you to also maybe,
so I'm not
sorry.
saying that it's a lost cause, but I think that the risks have to reach a level where it's in their interest to change. The same with Turkey, and I think that point with Turkey will come because ultimately Turkey is a threat to Zionist supremacy in the region. And ultimately, Erdogan can't keep playing all the ends against the middle. At some point, he's going to be under threat from Washington and the Zionist movement, which of course is very much controlling Washington's policy in the region anyway.
Yes, that's so true. Maybe in a future episode, I'd love to get your thoughts on what Turkey is doing and what future Turkey is looking at, and how those two things don't really make much sense. But also, I just wanted to maybe end this conversation on this question on Ukraine that you've mentioned a few times. When from quite early on, I was thinking in my mind, I can see a time when this war in Ukraine and this conflict in West Asia is all going to kind of merge into one big thing if we're not careful and if these linger on forever. How do you see what's happening now? Because with Ukraine, we've got another conflict, a bit like the Americans, where they've actually lost the war on the ground, but they just cannot bring themselves to negotiate an end to the war. So they're just throwing good money after bad and throwing more lives into this conflict that they're not going to win ultimately. But somehow, as you mentioned, they're not kind of containing this thing. Can you hear me? They're not. Sorry, I was
Yes,
going to say
I can.
they're not containing this thing within the Ukrainian battlefield. There's been news now about how Ukraine has had contracts with a few Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, and they're going to be providing them with drones and all of these other anti-drone technologies. I didn't actually know about this connection that you mentioned with Syria, so it seems like Ukraine is wanting to play a greater role in this other conflict that doesn't concern them directly. And I've even heard, I was reading some newspapers and stuff about how even European analysts are really getting worried about this because they understand that Ukraine cannot control this Russian conflict and is kind of entering itself into a bigger arena that it doesn't have enough knowledge of. And how is that going to end up? What are your thoughts on what Ukraine is doing and what outcome that could bring to both of those wars?
Something makes me want to start this with Russia made such a huge strategic mistake to abandon Syria because now it's effectively surrounded. It's surrounded as Russia itself. It's effectively subordinate now to China, in my opinion. But also, even in Syria, it's surrounded. It's surrounded by who? By the Al-Qaeda Takfiri elements, including the Chechens, by the Ukrainians, by the Turks. And I know for a fact that they've received warnings from Saudi Arabia of potential attacks on the Khmeimim base. So they have effectively isolated themselves, even though it may have been painful short term to continue to support the resistance axis in the West Asia region. But now they've reached a point where they're isolated and they have no allies, largely speaking, in the region.
Yes.
No ideological allies, right? So that's number one. Number two, is Ukraine losing the war? Because again, I'll come back to Putin's popularity in Russia for not being tough enough, for allowing all of the red lines to be crossed, for allowing a large number of Russian energy and oil facilities to be attacked by drone successfully by Ukraine. And by the way, if Ukraine is actually selling drone technology to the Zionist Arab Gulf states, that's very likely to be a copy of the Iranian drones that have been
Yes.
supplied
So it's gone
to
full circle.
Russia, and
Yeah.
that's why it's kind of laughable to me that the Russia fans on social media are forever pushing the concept that Iran wouldn't be able to fight this war without Russia. In my opinion, Russia would not have sustained the war against Ukraine without the support of Iran and the drone technology coming in from Iran. Right, that's number one. Ukraine has always been, because Ukraine is effectively an agent of NATO, but also an agent of the Zionist movement. Because if people remember, back in 2014, there were units of the IOF fighting in Maidan during the coup. There are still strong connections between Ukraine and Israel. I mean, historically, they go back right to the formation of the Republic of Ukraine, where there was the agreement between Jabotinsky, one of the founders of revisionist Zionism that Netanyahu follows, and Simon Petlura, the original president of the newly minted Republic of Ukraine, to effectively form an alliance between Jewish militia and the Nazi militia, effectively, right? The Zionist militia and the Nazi militia against the threat of Russia. And so for me, it makes perfect sense that Ukraine is being weaponized in this way. Even prior to the fall of Syria, we knew that there were Ukrainian special forces, not only in Idlib, but also in the northeast with the Kurds. And I would almost guarantee you would find Ukrainian special forces in the Kurdish separatist areas on the border with Iran. That's me speculating, but I would almost certainly say that that is the case. And the fact that they're back inside Syria now at this pivotal point in the containment or the degradation of Hezbollah as one of the strongest allies, both ideologically and militarily, of Iran and historically of Iran, makes perfect sense to me. I'm not very surprised about it at all. And again, because people say to me, well, how is Jolani getting weapons? You know, Israel effectively bombed all of the Syrian Arab army capability in the 2 days after the fall of Damascus. They don't need air defense. Hezbollah doesn't have an air force. Right. What they need is drone technology, light weapons, artillery, tanks, many of which they captured from those that were left behind by the Syrian army and the Russians when they went in their various directions. And the weapons have been coming in, we kind of know about, that are coming in from Ukraine. So it's Ukrainian special forces that have been supplying the weapons to replenish Jolani's supplies and the Russians. Very early on in 2025, Jolani was recorded at a meeting in Idlib where he said, right, fine, we'll continue buying weapons from Russia. And if you remember, Russia was one of the first to normalize relations with Jolani and to invite him to the Kremlin. And one of the first, Bogdanov, was the first world leader or world foreign minister, to deputy foreign minister to come to Damascus and meet with the new Al-Qaeda unelected regime. So for me, and I'd be really interested to get Ehsan's view on this, but I'm not surprised that Ukraine is being used to expand the war, because I don't see Ukraine as a separate entity. I just see it as another proxy of NATO and Israel in the region.
Yes. And I also heard that this vessel, that Iranian vessel that Ukraine attacked, was also on behest of Israel. And also, I can never understand Putin's obsession or love-hate relationship with Israel, because I don't understand why Putin has this kind of romantic link to Israel,
He's always
despite
had it.
what, yes.
Yeah, he's
But
always
also
had
it
it.
is interesting how Putin has had a lot of criticism inside Russia, especially since
Mm,
this war with Iran has started, because Russians are seeing if Iran can handle the war like this, what the hell is Russia doing? Why are we pussyfooting around all of these NATO forces when Iran just came out so quickly and attacked American bases everywhere. Ehsan, what are your thoughts on the same topic? I'd love to get your thoughts as well on how this whole Ukraine war may be impacting what's going on in Iran, and the Iranian war might also be impacting what's going on inside Ukraine. And also, following this attack from Ukraine on Iranian vessel, do you think there's going to be a response from Iran?
Well, let's just start by let me start from another question. When you talk about Ukraine, entering the war and doing all these things, um, there are sometimes that some statesmen, some individuals make a wrong decision, right? Bringing Ukraine to trying to push Ukraine into the NATO on behalf of the Ukrainian politicians, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
Now their country has been destroyed. They have lost a couple of oblasts, Donbass, everything. There's not really that much that really deters them.
Yeah.
They're at the rock bottom in a
True.
way, right? What is Russia going to do? Is it going to march towards Kyiv? How are they going to finance that war? How are they going to? I know that there are certain people inside Russia, and they might get angry at me for saying this. But what I'm trying to say is that maybe the inaction of Russia for so long is what has led Russia to this current juncture, right? There was a series of mistakes that were done that they have gone into this they have come to this very, very difficult position that it's not really clear as to what can be the out of the war. I have my own suggestion, but let's not really talk about that for now. But I'm trying to talk about Ukraine for now, right? When you're in this position, previously Ukraine was, for example, producing aircraft engines, which is a very demanding task, right? So they had a good thing going on with regard to their own manufacturing power. What are you going to bring back to bring back your GDP to the pre-war levels? One of the things that countries do is to export services. Ukraine has effectively become this war state, right? They have sort of become like these mercenaries. Their only value as of right now is to be cannon fodders, to go into different countries and export military attaches, military advisors. This is the only thing that they have left. So in that sense, it actually makes perfect sense for Ukraine to actually enter the war. It makes sense for them to attack Iran, considering the fact that the Iranian bureaucracy makes it very difficult for the Iranian politicians and their the lack of courage the lack of courage. I don't know why I said college. Courage makes it very difficult for certain portion of the Iranian political echelon to make the necessary actions. Why wouldn't they do that? Which is something that leads me to your question. Do we have the means in order to strike Ukraine? Yes. Is it something that we should do? Probably not. Why? Because I'm going to explain as to why. Most of the drone manufacturing warehouses and the military equipment facilities, the industrial base of Ukraine, has actually been moved out of the country into other countries like Germany, like Britain, not Britain, I think Poland, if I remember
Poland.
correctly.
Poland, yeah.
Yes. to these countries. So you can't really attack them. Like they're, in terms of target value, there's nothing really there. What they want to do, what they did was basically try to get on the good side of United States president, right?
Yeah.
They showed their value as mercenaries, as guns for hires, right? And the same thing with regard to these Arab Zionist countries in the Persian Gulf. So
Yeah.
that's how I see the position. Now, if the other party is converging with regard to, connecting these two fronts, the question becomes, what is Russia and Iran doing in order to address that? Look, there are a lot of things that are being said which are not quite correct. For example, Iran has satellites into the orbit that have a resolution of 3 centimeters. Anyone knows that if you use extensive AI models, you can actually further enhance that the resolution of the satellites, and get even a better resolution. Basically, Iran has a 1 centimeter. It has a satellite with a resolution of 1 centimeter that it can again use the same thing. So we have a lot of tools at our disposal. We are very happy and very grateful of the kind of support that Russia has provided Iran with. But I have made this point time and time and time again,
Yeah.
actually ad nauseum, that when you listen to the noises, I call it noise. I call them noises because that's what it is. When you compare the Algerian Air Force with the Iranian Air Force, and the commentary that comes out of the mouth of some of these supposed military analysts, you don't see a match, a correlation between the reality and what is coming out of their mouth. Algeria has a fantastic air force that is the point of envy for any Iranian military analyst. But you don't see people talk about that. And considering the war, considering the fact that to a certain extent, I don't want to exaggerate, but to a certain extent, we're fighting the same enemy and we're sharing the same destiny in a way again. This becomes very difficult for me to see that, Russia has exported Sukhoi Su-57 to Algeria, but they can't really do anything, to the extent that, for example, I think can be done in order to help Iran. These days, you see that Russians are bragging about exporting Geran drones to Iran. What is Geran? It's the technology that was transferred to Russia
Shahid.
by the Iranian engineers. It's Shahed 136 being developed in Russia. Is this the way that you want to brag about helping Iran, by exporting Iran's own technology back to it? Don't you think that some other observers would actually see this as, being an opportunistic action? Aren't you at least a little bit worried about that? Because I actually talked about this on an episode that we recorded with Vanessa, that this is extremely, I don't know what these people are talking about. They are in my opinion, they're the biggest enemies of Russia, basically portraying themselves as defenders of Russia online. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that currently at this juncture, we share enemies, right? There are things that we can do. Let me put it this way. The Iranian defense strategy comes from, again, years and years of coming up with this solution to prepare to use every lever at Iran's disposal in order to gain victory, right? But in terms of certain tools, we are lagging behind, right? There is no shortage of talent inside Iran in order to build an air force within the country, and that air force can actually do a lot in terms of putting an end to this war. But this is something that we're not seeing, at least so far. If there is
Yeah.
some sort of highly classified program that I'm somehow not aware of, that's something else. Then I will come on this show and apologize to your audience. But as of right now, I don't see the necessary actions being taken uh, on on in terms of strengthening its alliance. I think that when you see a video of, for example, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and I'm sorry, I have to beat around the bushes and, sort of tiptoe around my way through this minefield of people's ego and perceptions being shattered by truth. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know that this may result in me babbling on in vague language and rhetoric, but when I see Russian foreign minister going down an escalator and he's being asked, are you helping Iran? Are you sending weapons to Iran or something? And then he says, uh, it's a nice hat that you have or something. Like he complimented the look.
Hairstyle. It's a nice hairstyle.
Yeah. The point is that he said something about the look of that individual. People might see that and, say that, oh, yeah, they're helping and so on and so forth. But with regard to actual help, I think that unfortunately, in terms of the statesmen, we are still seeing people looking at the situation and they say to themselves, oh, what a great opportunity. United States is busy with Iran, right? So we can go and negotiate or we can go and, try to do our own thing. They don't see the convergence. This is the
Yeah.
big problem that I have with this thing. And it goes the same way for the Iranian politicians as well, in a way, right? So I'm not trying to put all the blame on one side. But again, I do believe that, the lack of taking necessary actions in the past, the failure to take necessary actions in the past, brought us to this juncture. And it still haunts us to this day, to the point that they don't, again, they're too afraid of making those decisions. And on the point of, Russia, Israel connections in certain ways, I want to just mention something. It's a food for thought for the people who really mention certain things. Iran, I think, purchased S-300 from Russia, late 2000s, 2006, 7, and it was delivered to Iran late at 2016, right? One might wonder why that happened, right? Some might point out to the fact that Iran sued Russia at the ICJ court in order to receive that, right? And that was something that scared the Russians, and they finally gave Iran the weapon systems that Iran had purchased, and it had made the what's it called? It transferred the money for, right? Something completely irrelevant. Around 2016, 2017, I don't remember exactly the exact time, but it was, I think, 2016 that United States equipped the Israeli Air Force with F-35s. The actions that are being taken, again, are very important are important. It's very important for us to look at the actions in a time-sensitive manner. Certain things that are being done are just enough in order to prolong a war, not to allow it to reach a natural and decisive conclusion.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to end my commentary with.
Thank you so much. That reminds me, Ehsan, when I was working in the civil service in the UK, um, I was on a training course to do presentations, and I really hate public speaking. And I was on my boss, he asked me to do like a dummy presentation just to see how it comes across. And I did a small presentation. At the end, he told me that your presentation, it had a beginning and a middle and a middle and a middle, as in it had no ending. It just kept going on and on. So I think that's kind of what Russia's doing. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm really so grateful for your time. Um, Sometimes I even forget the countries that you're sitting in. There's so much destruction and so much trials and tribulations going on around you. So, I mean, I'm extra grateful for your time, and I have my prayers for you. Bless you both, and keep safe. I hope we'll get together soon and discuss an end to this war and future possibilities for Iran and for the region as a whole.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Lufin. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. And for the viewers, please remind you once again, please go and check out Vanessa's channel and Ehsan's channel as well. We'll have them as collaboration links, so you should be able to easily find them. They're both brilliant channels, and I'm sure you're going to like them. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day.